Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into a topic today that's, well, it's pretty heavy, but really important, especially if you're thinking about the UPSC exams. We're talking about the whole issue of AI-generated CSAM and how, legal systems are trying to adapt.
Mhm.
It's a fast-moving target, this whole AI thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the UK is kind of leading the charge here with some really interesting new laws. So we're going to be looking at that, but also bringing it back to India, of course, and what might be done here.
Right. And for this, we're looking at a few things. There's the global picture of this threat, how worried people are about AI and this kind of material. Then the UK's approach specifically, and then, of course, the Indian context. And for that, we've got the National Crime Records Bureau report from 2022, data right up to April this year, 2024, from the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal, and also some recommendations from the National Human Rights Commission back in 2023.
So quite a bit to unpack, but basically we want to understand these specific problems AI-generated CSAM throws up.
Right.
Like what makes it different, what makes it hard to deal with, and then what are the legal and regulatory options? And as you said, the focus is really going to be on what India can learn from what's happening internationally, particularly in the UK.
Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the problem itself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just that CSAM exists, right? The whole game has changed with AI.
Completely. The fundamental issue now is that, well, you have artificial intelligence that can actually generate, possess, and distribute what appears to be child sexual abuse material. And this is a huge leap, really. You've got these very sophisticated AI models, generative models, and they can learn patterns from, enormous data sets. And then they can create completely new content. Like it's photorealistic, it's very hard to tell from the real thing. And that's what's making everyone so worried.
Yeah, it's a pretty dark thought, isn't it? And this isn't some far-off possibility. There's a lot of concern, and it's growing, that these AI tools will be used or are already being used to make this horrific content.
Yeah, for sure. And that concern is reflected in the numbers. We're seeing more and more cyber crimes against children globally, and India, sadly, is not immune to this at all. And these AI tools, as they become more powerful and more widely available, they just make the situation more acute.
Which brings us to the UK and what they're doing. It seems like they're really taking a proactive approach with these new laws. So what exactly are they doing that's so different?
Okay, so the UK is taking a pretty pioneering step, I'd say. Their new law is directly targeting AI-generated CSAM. Now, a lot of existing laws already deal with possession and distribution of this material, right? But the UK is going further. They're criminalizing not just the content itself, but also the AI tools that are specifically designed to generate it. So possessing, creating, distributing those tools, that'll be illegal.
So it's not just about the image or the video, it's about the technology that made it. That's a big shift.
Exactly. And to underline that shift, they're even making it illegal to have like manuals or guides that tell you how to use AI to make CSAM. So it's really about getting ahead of the problem, stopping it before it starts.
It's like instead of reacting to the harm, they're trying to prevent the harm from even happening in the first place. And you mentioned a new kind of approach in legal thinking.
Yeah, so traditionally, legal systems have been what we call accused-centric, meaning they focus on the person who commits the crime, and also act-centric, meaning they look at the harmful act itself. But what the UK is doing here with this new law is more tool-centric. So by focusing on the tools, they're basically saying that certain technologies are just so risky, in terms of how they might be misused, that you need to intervene before they're even used for bad purposes.
Interesting. It makes you think about the whole balance between innovation and keeping people safe. That's going to come up more and more, right, as AI gets more powerful.
Definitely. It's a huge debate. Now, you might be wondering how this new UK law, this tool-centric one, is different from what they already had. So they've had laws like the Protection of Children Act way back in 1978, and then the Coroners and Justice Act from 2009. But those mainly deal with offenses where, an actual child has been abused. AI-generated stuff created a kind of loophole because technically no child is directly harmed when you make it. But obviously the potential for harm is huge, right? Like normalizing abuse, encouraging real-world exploitation, all of that. So this new legislation closes that loophole.
I see. So it's acknowledging that even though no physical harm happens in the creation of this AI-generated material, the potential consequences are just too serious to ignore. Okay, so what are the real benefits of this approach then? This proactive, tool-centric strategy, like how does it actually help reduce harm in practical terms?
Okay, so A few key things. First, it gives law enforcement a chance to step in much earlier.
Right.
If you're going after the people making and spreading these AI tools, or even those who are trying to learn how to use them, then you can potentially act before tons of CSAM is produced and gets out there. And that leads to the second benefit, which is, of course, reducing the harm itself. If you limit how much of this material is being made and shared, then you're limiting the potential damage both to potential victims and to society as a whole. The psychological impact, all of that.
Right, it makes sense. So it's about getting ahead of the curve. And this wasn't just like a random decision by the UK, right? There was a specific report that kind of laid the groundwork for all of this.
Yeah, that's right. There's a report called the International AI Safety Report 2025. It came out, it was a joint effort between the UK's Department for Science, Innovation and Technology and their AI Security Institute. And they really highlighted the dangers of AI-generated CSAM. It was that report that provided the evidence and the impetus for this legislative response.
Right. So the UK is making some big moves, but now let's bring it back home. What's the situation like in India with CSAM? And how is AI likely to make things even tougher?
Well, the situation in India is unfortunately already very concerning. And as with many other parts of the world, it's pretty much guaranteed that these AI tools are going to make things even worse. I mean, the statistics are quite alarming. The NCRB, so that's the National Crime Records Bureau, their 2022 report showed a really sharp increase in cybercrimes against children. And then you've got the National Cybercrime Reporting Portal. As of April this year, they'd recorded, get this, 1.94 lakh cases of child pornography incidents. That's almost 2 lakh cases. It just shows you the scale of the problem we're already dealing with. And then to think that AI could make it even worse.
So the fear is that AI will be like a catalyst, right? It'll make it easier to make this stuff and maybe harder to track down.
Exactly. AI makes it so easy to create realistic but totally fake CSAM and to spread it. It lowers the bar for offenders, and it could lead to just a massive increase in the amount of this harmful stuff online.
We do have laws in India, though, right? You mentioned the IT Act and the POCSO Act.
Right.
How effective are they right now in dealing with this AI threat?
Right, so we do have laws. Section 67B of the Information Technology Act, which is from 2000, that deals with publishing or transmitting material showing children in sexually explicit acts. And then the POCSO Act, Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act from 2012, that also had provisions about child pornography. But, and this is crucial, these laws were written before AI was really a thing, before it was so easy to use and so good at making images and videos. So they don't really address the specifics of AI-generated content.
So there's a gap, basically. Our laws need to catch up. And, thinking about India's tech scene and our legal system, what are the big hurdles to doing what the UK is doing? Are there specific things about AI development or enforcement in India that make it harder?
That's a really good question, especially if you're preparing for the UPSC. There are a few key areas we need to look at. First off, expanding legal definitions. The NHRC, that's the National Human Rights Commission, they recommended in 2023 that we replace the term child pornography with CSAM under the POCSO Act. That would give us wider coverage, potentially including AI-generated stuff more effectively.
So a more inclusive term that captures more of the harmful stuff. What else? What other steps are really needed?
Okay, we also need a clearer, more precise definition of sexually explicit in Section 67B of the IT Act. Right now, it's kind of vague, and that can make it hard to identify and block AI-generated CSAM in real time. A good, solid definition would give intermediaries and law enforcement more power to act decisively.
You've talked about intermediaries a lot. It seems like how they're regulated is a big part of this.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right now, in the IT Act, intermediaries mostly means entities that host or transmit data, like internet service providers and social media platforms. But the idea is to broaden that to explicitly include things like VPNs, those virtual private networks that mask your internet activity, VPS, virtual private servers, those are like remote computers you can use, and cloud service providers, because all of these can be used to, host and spread this illegal content. So bringing them under the definition would make them legally responsible for complying with CSAM laws.
So it's about making sure everyone who's involved in facilitating this activity is accountable. What about addressing the AI risk itself, directly in the legal framework?
Okay, this is probably the most crucial step for India. We need specific changes to our laws that deal with AI-generated CSAM. And the UK's law, the one we were talking about, that's a good example. If we make it a crime to create, possess, and distribute AI tools for this purpose, even the instruction manuals, then our law enforcement agencies can go after anyone who helps make this stuff, not just those sharing the final product.
And given that a lot of this happens online and, across borders, international cooperation it's got to be really important.
Absolutely. I mean, AI-generated CSAM, it's like a lot of cybercrime. It crosses borders all the time. So India needs to be actively supporting the UN Draft Convention on countering the use of information and communications technology for criminal purposes. Global cooperation it's the only way to effectively tackle these online threats that go beyond national boundaries.
And we've got the Digital India Act in the works, right? That seems like a perfect opportunity to address this head on.
Yeah, absolutely. The Digital India Act, it's being developed right now, 2023, to replace the old IT Act. So we have this chance to build in specific provisions to combat AI-generated CSAM right from the start. And honestly, taking inspiration from what the UK is doing, adapting it to the Indian context, that could be a game changer in how we fight this threat. And for UPSC aspirants, understanding how new laws like this are evolving to deal with such tricky tech challenges, that's something to really pay attention to.
Okay, so to sum up, the UK is taking a really proactive approach, and it's something we can learn from in India. Our existing laws, they just aren't enough to handle AI-generated CSAM. But if we update our legal definitions, make the rules for digital intermediaries stronger, introduce AI-specific amendments, maybe in the Digital India Act, and then work closely with other countries, then we can do a much better job of protecting children in this digital age.
Exactly. India has a real opportunity here. We can learn from what others are doing, update our laws, and stay ahead of this really worrying development in technology. It's about protecting the most vulnerable people in our society.
Well, this has been a tough topic, but an absolutely necessary conversation to have. AI-generated CSAM is a new and urgent challenge, and it needs a fast and thoughtful response from lawmakers and regulators.
It raises a big question, too, not just about CSAM, but about AI in general. How can we design our legal systems to be flexible and proactive so they can deal with the risks of AI, the things we might not even be able to foresee right now?
And for those of you preparing for the UPSC, this whole discussion shows how technology, law, and social issues like child protection are all linked. Looking at AI-generated CSAM and how different countries are responding, that's a perfect case study for understanding how policy needs to change and adapt to these new challenges.
We'd really encourage you to dig deeper into India's cyber laws and the discussions around the Digital India Act. Think about how these frameworks could be made stronger, not just for this threat, but for the whole landscape of cybercrime in a world where technology is constantly changing.
This deep dive was based on reporting in The Hindu. If you found it helpful for your UPSC prep, please like and subscribe for more in-depth analyses of important topics. And let us know in the comments what you think or if you have any questions. We always want to hear from you and explore these issues based on your interests.